What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, February 7th, 2017, getting into the week here. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. The news is all over the place today. We've got so many things to talk about. First of all, if you're down in Louisiana, you want to keep an eye out the window. At least 3 tornadoes have set down in the area of New Orleans and Baton Rouge. So you want to keep an eye out there for that. Those are obviously nasty things here. And Paul Craig Roberts came out with an interesting article that I think we need to look at here. I have a lot of respect for Paul Craig Roberts. We link to him all the time. We've had him on the show here. And he's out there talking about all these people who are starting to pick up on the fact that it looks like George Soros and his people are going to try a color revolution in this country, and basically saying that Trump needs to start cracking down on all these people talking about assassination and overthrow and coup d'etat. And Roberts is saying it is interesting how so many people have come to this same conclusion. Now, earlier today, the Senate convened to confirm Betsy DeVos as Education Secretary, and as expected, it was a tie, and Vice President Mike Pence cast the tie-breaking vote. This is the first time a vice president has had to break a tie in the Senate on a cabinet nomination in all of U.S. history. So Pence is already in the history books for that one. The contention, of course, is that Betsy is very pro-choice when it comes to education. If you do not like the education you're getting in the public schools, and many parents do not, then her recommendation, sorry about that, my mixer's going, her recommendation or her agenda is you should be allowed to choose and go to a charter school or a private school or something like that, possibly where they're not constrained by Common Core, which has become a sore point for a lot of American parents right now. And, of course, the people opposed to her are the ones who are currently involved in the public education system, and they see this idea of allowing parents and students a choice is going to work against their interests, because nobody's going to choose to go to a Common Core school if they have any other options out there. Now, neocon Elliott Abrams apparently is under consideration for Deputy Secretary of State, and he was tangled up in that whole Iran-Contra operation, which was the gun and drug running out of Arkansas down to Nicaragua, and I'm not sure what possessed the Trump administration to consider this individual for any kind of a position. But Rand Paul says he's going to oppose Elliott Abrams. Does not want him in there. And more and more, there are a lot of these appointments from the Trump administration that are raising a lot of eyebrows now, because some of them are neocons, clearly. Some of them are very much on board the war agenda. Many of them are globalists. And it almost seems like whoever's doing the vetting for Donald Trump is trying to get some ringers in there. And remember, when Donald Trump won the election, he had Chris Christie was doing the vetting for his administration slots, and Christie was just putting in all these neocons and these old guard, the same people who'd gotten us in this mess. Trump fired him and got Pence involved, but now Pence, of course, is vice president. And it looks like the deep state is still trying to infiltrate and hijack the Trump administration at this point. Now, then, we've been talking about arch troublemaker supervillain George Soros, and apparently during this last year, he was pouring money into the campaigns of Paul Ryan, Marco Rubio, Jeb Bush, John McCain, John Kasich, Lindsey Graham, and all of these people, of course, even though they're members of the Republican Party, were constantly on attack against Donald Trump. And now we know who they were working for. Now, interestingly enough, there is a new bill that's going to go before the Congress. It's called, or it's nicknamed, the Drain the Swamp Bill. And what they're talking about is maybe moving parts of the federal government outside of Washington, D.C. The place is very, very crowded, and originally, in an age where riding a horse was the fastest means of communication, it made sense to have it all clumped together in one area. But they're talking about maybe spreading some of the government a little bit further away. They're already doing that with the Pentagon, and CIA and NSA are not technically inside the Washington District of Columbia. And so now they're going to be loosening things up and allow some of these government agencies to go to, shall we put it politely, lower rent areas where they can conduct their business. And in this age of instantaneous global electronic communication, seems to make a lot of sense to me. It's going to save some money. Now, we mentioned this briefly yesterday, but it's worth going over again. And that is that in the last few weeks of his administration, Barack Obama was commuting the sentences of all these drug criminals. And one of them was Robert M. Gill, 68-year-old man, had been sentenced to life for heroin and cocaine distribution. His sentence was commuted by Obama. He was released, and he's back in jail. Apparently, he was caught dealing drugs again, went on a high-speed chase with police officers. He crashed his car, and he's back in prison. And what sense did it make to put these criminals back out on the street? And meanwhile, Leonard Peltier and Mumia Al-Jabbar are still in prison for crimes that they may not actually have committed, but they're political embarrassments, so they're never allowed to see the light of day again. You can commit any crime in the world and get away with it in the United States except embarrassing the power structure, then you are in serious trouble. Okay, we're going to take a moment here to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And let's see. Let me back up here a little bit. Okay. All right. Now then, Hillary Clinton has resurfaced. As you know, she's trying to figure out some way that she can do the comeback. She's talking about having her own reality TV show. She's out there. She's signed up with the Speakers Bureau to go on out and make speeches for $200,000 a pop. And Hillary Clinton apparently recorded a message to the women's rights campaign group Makers, in which she praised the recent anti-Trump Women's March in Washington, D.C. Then she goes on to say the future is female. Now, can you imagine some guy getting up there and saying the future is male? Boy, would the corporate media just rip the guy to shreds. And here we have Hillary Clinton saying the future is female, not a peep from the corporate media. Apparently it's open season on us white heterosexual males in our current culture. Now then, getting over to the war zones, there's a lot of stuff going on here. And apparently Greece and Turkey are ratcheting up the tensions over some disputed islands in the eastern Aegean Sea. And it's just like that South China Sea situation. The islands are very small. They're not very useful. But they're a focus point for underlying tensions and agendas. And so we could actually see something happen there as well. Now, Sergei Kaplan, who's a deputy for Poroshenko's administration, has broadcast over Ukrainian TV that the Ukrainian population must prepare for a protracted war. And he's out there saying no more Minsk agreement, no negotiations, no geopolitical shifts are going to stabilize the situation. We should learn to live in a state of war for the next few years. Now here's where it gets really interesting, because according to a story in Russia Insider, Ukrainian media and intelligence assets freely admit the fighting in East Ukraine began with a government offensive, and the strategy they're using is Kiev will grab a piece of land, and then the Eastern Ukrainian republics will try and grab it back, and Kiev will scream Russian aggression, Russian aggression, Russian aggression. So they're really cranking up on that, but they may be jumping the gun here, because it's being reported over in Zero Hedge that in their telephone conversation, President Trump failed to indicate strong support for Poroshenko. And a lot of other officials in the U.S. government are wishing this whole problem would go away, because what started out to be yet another covert overthrow of a legitimate government has really blossomed into a major public relations nightmare. Now, Poroshenko's position is one of desperation. Ukraine is out of money. They're hideously in debt, and there's no new money coming on in. And Poroshenko is literally gambling that if he can start a war with Russia, that financial resources along with weapons will pour into his government so he can hang on to power. But it is a very high-risk gamble. In fact, Veterans News Now is calling it Poroshenko's last chance saloon, where he's acting more and more like a has-been gunfighter, trying to bluff his way through his last meeting at high noon. And there's another problem with the Ukrainian forces. Apparently, alcoholism has become a major problem because of all the stress they're under. They call it self-tranquilizing for stress. And they just had an embarrassing incident where 3 Ukrainian soldiers were killed by their own grenades. Another one just lost a hand. And they're out there bragging they're the most powerful armies of Europe. They're obviously dealing with a serious morale problem and a lack of discipline. Not a good recipe. Now, Maxine Waters is fully on board with the war agenda. And she was out there screaming about Putin being responsible for supplying the bombs that killed innocent children and families, and she had to stumble. Somebody had to give her the word Aleppo. And then Waters goes on and says, and the fact that he, meaning Trump, is wrapping his arms around Putin while Putin is continuing to advance in Korea. She actually said that. And, of course, you know, there's really not much difference between Korea and Crimea, besides the spelling, the culture, the language, and where they are on planet Earth. But other than that, they're exactly the same. And it's just basically Maxine Waters is out there just reading the script, and it's clear she hasn't really thought about what's going on. She's just out there to sell the war, sell the war, sell the war, sell the war. Now, over at The Guardian, they're running a story which is clearly a piece of pro-war propaganda. And it's based on a report from Amnesty International that 13,000 prisoners were secretly hanged in a Syrian jail, according to Amnesty International, and said that many more people died through torture and starvation, bodies dumped in a mass grave. Now, you need to remember, Amnesty International has a very long and well-documented history of bias against non-Western nations. And if you read this report, it's written in very inflammatory language. It's not dry statement of fact. It's out there, oh, it's horrible, it's horrific. So this is the current version of Assad is gassing his own people. It's just as phony. They're trying to find a way to get us to say, yes, take my children, take my money, go make war on Assad. Now, getting on back to that whole issue about Russia tinkering with politics in other countries here in the U.S., and, of course, nobody talks about how Israel is tinkering with the politics of every nation on earth, or George Soros is, because they're the good guys. We don't talk about that. Russia's the bad guys, so it's a terrible situation. Merkel has tried to duck responsibility for the downturn of her political fortunes, the failure of the refugee policy, by saying that Russia has been meddling in German politics. Well, Germany's spy agency, the BND, did an investigation, and they couldn't find any evidence at all of Russia waging any kind of a disinformation campaign against Berlin. I wish the BND would do an investigation into Israel's tinkering with German politics. It hit pay dirt on that one, no question about that. Now, Nigel Farage is basically wagging his finger rather sternly at Parliament, who is now describing as having adopted not just an anti-Trump stance, but blatant anti-Americanism, because the United States is no longer part of this global government nonsense. And Farage is just on the attack there. Now, according to the latest poll in Germany, if the election were held today, instead of this coming September, Merkel would lose. by a wide, wide margin. So the situation is not looking good for her. I got an email from somebody saying, oh, Merkel will just steal the election, and she may try, but that's rather hard to do when the voters of the world are now aware that elections are very often dishonest. They're going to be looking for the fraud, especially after what happened here in the U.S. last year, especially what happened with the Scottish referendum, the independence referendum. They weren't even trying to hide the fraud. Now, former French President Nicolas Sarkozy is looking at a potential jail sentence. He's been charged with fraud and running a corrupt election campaign. And the charges are fraud, false accounting, breach of trust. And, of course, Sarkozy's whole political party is embroiled in all kinds of sleaze allegations. Francois Fillon, who was once Sarkozy's prime minister, is looking at his own time in jail over this fake job scam involving his wife, who was paid a huge amount of taxpayer money for a job that didn't actually require her to do anything, not even to show up. A lot of chaos out there on the international scene. Down in Australia, their coalition government is basically clinging to office by a one-seat majority since last July's elections. And now it looks like there may be a defection in the offing, which would basically possibly bring the Liberal National Coalition out of power. And they'll have to form a whole new coalition government or call for early elections down there. So let's talk about the corporate media here just a little bit. Figures released this week show profits for the New York Slimes fell by more than 25% last year. The last time something in New York fell this fast, it had to be thrown into a van by the Secret Service. Now, Marine Le Pen is out there, and she is getting confrontational with the media. She's adopting Trump's approach, saying, no, what you're saying is not accurate. And CNN's Christine Amanpour is still out there pushing this story that Russia stole Crimea. And Marine Le Pen is saying there was a coup d'etat in Ukraine. There was no invasion. And it's the corporate media is starting to look like the Monty Python's argument clinic, where all they do is they just keep saying the same thing over and over again. They're not listening to anybody but themselves. They're just out there to push the propaganda as hard as they can. And talk about going over the shark. MSNBC's Katie Tour came on out and said Donald Trump may start killing journalists, suiciding them, arcaniciding them. Because we, the Democrats, would never do anything like that, but Donald Trump is a Republican. We know about those Republicans. Now, as you know, last Sunday was the Super Bowl, and a big part of the fun of Super Bowl are seeing these commercials, which are the best of the best. And two of them have aroused a little bit of ire. One of them was Budweiser's commercial, which was clearly pushing a pro-immigration theme. And as it turns out, the story in the commercial was a complete fraud. Yes, Adolphus Busch did come to New Orleans from Germany, and he did partner with Eberhard Anheuser to start the beer company. But he never traveled up a river on a raft with a black man. He didn't arrive poor. He came from a very, very wealthy family. He arrived with the money. Originally wanted to start a winery, then he settled for beer. And he never faced that kind of discrimination, because when he came here, everybody was an immigrant. Nobody was yelling at him when he arrived. The thing was a complete fiction from beginning to end. Now, we're going to take a break for commercials. When we come on back, we're going to be talking about one of the other commercials at the Super Bowl, which has really ignited a firestorm of controversy. So we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And so the other commercial at the Super Bowl that was causing a great deal of consternation was the commercial by Audi, which was pushing this idea that women are not paid the same as men for the same work. And this is a claim by the feminists that has been debunked so many times, and yet they keep on repeating it. And again, they're trying to create victim classes to exploit for the next election. I would almost imagine that Audi might see a drop in sales because of this commercial, because so many people are angry with it. Now, getting on over to the economic news, it looks like Greece's economy is going to collapse under the weight of its huge debt, a significant portion of which was created through the underhanded actions of Papandreou and Goldman Sachs, who were trying to conceal from the European Union the true scale of Greece's debt problem, and it wound up doubling the debt. Needless to say, Goldman Sachs made a huge amount of money off of this. And apparently the austerity requirements being pushed on Greece by its creditors have all but paralyzed the country. And Greece is now basically saying that it's time to default on all these bailouts, which were not bailouts, they were just more loans, and it's time to renegotiate. Meanwhile, of course, up in Brussels, the bureaucrats are saying, it's not our fault that Greece is in trouble, it's not our fault Cyprus is in trouble, it's not our fault Italy's in trouble, it's not our fault France is in trouble, or it's not our fault that the whole EU is in trouble. The euro is a great success. It's wonderful. How could you not love a single currency for the entire world? Well, I don't have a problem with a single currency for the entire world. I have a problem with a currency that is loaned into circulation at interest, because that is a tool of debt slavery. And the private central banks have been playing this scummy little trick on the human race for 300 years. Enough is enough is enough is enough. It's time to call it off. Now then, we're starting to see gold prices move upward. So far, year to date, they're up 6.6%. And a lot of people are saying this signals increased market volatility. And we all know there's a big upset coming somewhere. Now, yesterday we were talking about how Arizona had passed a law to make silver and gold legal tender within that state, to run a parallel currency to the Federal Reserve note, one that pointedly does not pay interest to the Federal Reserve. Now it looks like Utah is getting ready to follow suit. They're going to make gold and silver legal tender, and even more than that, they're going to try and move away from using the Federal Reserve note within their state as much as possible. Now, I know Donald Trump is trying to bring jobs back to the United States, and he's having some success. Unfortunately, he's not able to keep up with all these corporations that are still offshoring jobs or just slashing their workforce as the economy comes to a stall. Between 2001 and 2015, California lost over 500,000 jobs to China. And if you look at the total number of Americans who cannot find work, have not been able to find work for months and years, it's a huge number. It's over 90 million. We have to get these people back to work. And until all these people are back to work, we shouldn't be allowing anybody from a foreign country to come here and get a job. It just doesn't make sense. Now, as you know, over at the Vatican Bank, they've had a string of scandals throughout the years, one of which ended up with one of the bankers dangling beneath a bridge in London. And right now, as you know, the Pope had promised that they were going to clean up their act. Oh, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about the Vatican Bank, which has had a long history of scandals. And Pope Francis promised that they were going to clean this whole mess up. But as it turns out, according to the Italian newspaper Il Giornale, it says that the cleanup will never be permanent because they have revealed there are 30 accounts at the Vatican Bank that are off limits to auditors. They're untouchable. They have been told, you may not look at these 30 accounts. Go and just do whatever, and all the other accounts, do whatever you want. These 30 you may not touch. So there's something going on over there. We're going to take a phone call. Debbie in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, how's it going?
Well, it's going.
Okay, well, have you talked about Hannity's interview with Ollie North yet?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so I almost got in a car accident. I was driving home yesterday, and it's a 5-minute commute. I hear Ollie North talking to Hannity, and they're warmongering. He's warmongering big time, and all of a sudden he says, it's a new world order, and Trump is leading the way. Have you heard that yet?
No, I hadn't heard that, and the funny thing is that Trump, much of the opposition against him is because he's not going along with this new world order. His whole campaign about, putting America first, and ADL was screaming that was anti-Semitic. The German media today are out there saying his slogan ought to be America first and Germany second, which for any leader of any sovereign nation, their nation should be at the head of the list, not the other way around. But Ollie North, as you know, was up to his neck in that whole Iran-Contra mess. It's been documented that he lied about a lot of things. But, yeah, they brought him back here to sell this war agenda. They're trying to gin up this war before Trump can throw the brakes onto it.
By the way, did you ever listen to Trump's speech at the APEC meeting right before he started running?
Yeah, he was playing politics. So, and unfortunately, he is very pro-Israel. Apparently, his father is friends with Benjamin Netanyahu, so it's all family. And that one area that I'm definitely not in agreement with Trump about is his approach to Israel. That being said, some of Trump's recent comments would seem to indicate that I was correct in my assessment that once he started dealing directly with the reality of Israel's government, rather than simply being told by the corporate media, Israel is this and Israel is that, that he might cool a little bit. And certainly his stance on the formerly illegal, now apparently legal, headed to the international courts, would indicate that his enthusiasm for Israel has waned just a little tiny bit.
Well, I'm surprised to hear you say that, because it sounds like it's just the opposite. It sounds like he's, Netanyahu's best friend, and he's banging the war drums big time. Some of your callers over the last few days have been really worried about it. They've been putting it to you, and you respond cautiously, which is, very, I think, wise. However, you say, give it 3 months. Give it 3 months. Heck, the war could be over. He could drop the bomb in 3 months, and it'd be over. So I really think that...
What I'm saying here is, okay, two things to keep in mind. This is the reason I'm being cautious. And I am very troubled with a lot of the rhetoric we're hearing coming out of the Trump administration. Okay, and we have to, first of all, wade through all the attempts by the corporate media to spin it and warp it to their own purposes, and we have to go back to Trump himself. But as I mentioned, there are two aspects to keep in mind. The first is that Donald Trump is still trying to get his nominees through Senate confirmation. And we cannot discount the possibility that his Senate nominees and Donald Trump himself are saying what they think the war hawks in the Senate want to hear in order to secure those confirmations. Look how close it was with Betty DeVos. So I'm not waiting for the 100 days so much as I'm waiting for the end of the confirmation process to see if Donald Trump does a change or not. And if he doesn't, then yeah, we're in serious, serious trouble. But as I said the other day...
By the way, James Fetzer's repeating that. I think that's a compliment to you, because he keeps repeating that. He was on Rent's Life last night repeating your exact lines, and I think he got it from you, unless you got it from him.
Well, there's a lot of cross-pollination going on, and I'm not too concerned if people are taking what I say and spreading it, because that's how the information gets out there. The other thing to keep in mind, though, if you really want to understand Donald Trump, you need to read his book, The Art of the Deal. And in that book, he says his opening move for any negotiation is to make demands that are way, way, way beyond reasonable, and then let the other side negotiate back to what Donald Trump was willing to accept in the first place. So that negotiating tactic served him very well in business. I expect he may well be using it now that he's president. He's not concerned with the loss of face by appearing to back up that you would get from the career politicians. But again, at this point, we have to wait and see what's actually going on. I'll give you one good example. All this tough talk about Iran, Iran was talking tough back. Iran may have blinked, because apparently they were going to put another missile test, and last word we got is they pulled the missile off the launch pad. No explanation.
But why is he even saying that to begin with? I mean, here's just one last question, though, for you.
Yeah.
If it turns out that he's serious about all this Iran stuff, are you going to go on the record saying it's over for him? He's absolutely a traitor.
Well, I'm going to go even farther than that. If Donald Trump does not significantly alter the course of the economy and the militaristic agenda of his predecessors, Donald Trump could easily be the last president the United States ever has. And it won't just be him that is gone, it will be the United States that will be gone.
Okay, well, I hope you're the first one to call him out if this happens. So thank you for all the work that you do. I listen to you every day. It's great.
All right, well, thank you very much, and we're going to let you go here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, over in Poland, the PIS party leader, Jaroslaw Kaczynski, is calling for European Union reform. And what he's actually saying there is the exact opposite of what we're getting out of Brussels. He's saying that for the European Union to survive, the individual nation states have to be strengthened, and they have to reduce the control of Brussels over the EU. Now remember, the European Union originally began as a free trade bloc. That was it. Free trade across the borders, no tariffs or anything. Open borders, Schengen, you can walk anywhere you want within the EU without border controls. That's all it was, and that's what it was sold to the people of Europe, along with the single currency. But over time, as governments are wont to do, Brussels grabbed more and more and more power, culminating with the Treaty of Lisbon, which significantly expanded the power of Brussels in 2007. The other issue, of course, they're still dealing with is that refugee, migrant crisis, which is really becoming a serious, serious problem for the people of Europe and even for some of their political leaders. Now, apparently, things are so tenuous in the EU, Angela Merkel has flown to Poland because Poland is very Eurosceptic. They're talking about a Polish exit from the EU, and Merkel is over there trying to gently twist their arms and say, you can't do that, you got to stay in the EU, it's going to work out in the long run. And she's getting more and more resistance. It hasn't worked out. I mean, it's worked out great for Brussels. It's worked out great for the political leaders who have sold their soul to the New World Order. But for the ordinary people of Europe, this has been a disaster, both because of the migrant crisis and because of that private central bank. So, over in Germany, in the North Rhine-Westphalia area, they're getting ready to have their carnival. And the police were sending letters to the homes of migrants saying, you might want to stay away from carnival. There is a great deal of hostility toward the migrants among the German people. And that's certainly true. And instead, the German media has turned around and criticized the police. How dare you tell them to stay away? Well, if you know there's going to be confrontations, isn't that the smart thing to do? Are you going to have the Crips and the Bloods both show up at the same time and then just hope that there's not going to be a problem? Everybody's trying to solve this. The only solution is to let these people go back home. Stop all these wars of aggression that made these people refugees and let them go back home. Now, let's see. We are coming up in just a little over an hour at 3 p.m. Pacific time. A 3-judge panel at the appeals court will be hearing arguments regarding this Seattle federal judge who put a temporary stay on Donald Trump's travel ban. And I'm glad they used that. We're still hearing Muslim ban, Muslim ban, Muslim ban all over the corporate media. It is nothing of the sort. It is a ban on specific countries known to be hostile to the United States, known to be hotbeds of terrorism. If you are in one of those nations, it doesn't matter if you're Muslim, Christian, Jew, atheist, Pastafarian, Scientologist, you're going to have trouble getting into this country. If you're coming from a country not on the list, you're not going to have any issues. Canadian Muslims are still coming back and forth across the border without any problems whatsoever. It's not a Muslim ban, and we've got to push back everywhere they try and say that. So more and more people are coming on out and saying that this Seattle judge, who's a known activist from the bench, had no grounds for a stay on Donald Trump's order because of Title 8, Section 1182F, U.S. law, and it's 65 years old, and nobody's ever complained about it before, and it has been used before. And it states, whenever the President finds that the entry of any aliens or of any class of aliens into the United States would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, he may, by proclamation, and for such period as he shall deem necessary, suspend the entry of all aliens or any class of aliens as immigrants or non-immigrants, or impose on the entry of aliens any restrictions he may deem to be appropriate. Title 8, Section 1182F plainly authorizes the President to issue temporary bans on any class of aliens for national security purposes, which is exactly what Donald Trump has done. And he did specifically cite Title 8, Section 1182F. So, the law is on Trump's side. So is common sense. Now, a survey carried out by the London-based think tank, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, found that the majority of Europeans want a stop to all of this migrant nonsense. And they think any further migration should stop because they're crowded, it's brought in crime, illness, corruption, pop-up brothels, and they've really had enough of it. They want it to stop. Apparently just 20% of Europeans support the continuation of the refugee migrant program. And by the way, 100 years ago, President Theodore Roosevelt banned Muslim immigration to the United States. Now, in his case, it was a proclamation to ban anybody who practiced in or believed in polygamy, which was not only something that would block the Muslims, but also the Mormons. And that was within his authority to do. Nobody but the Mormons and Muslims complained about that. Now, as you know, recently all of the Silicon Valley high-tech corporations, 120 of them, signed a legal brief to oppose Donald Trump's executive order on immigration. It has now come on out that Google was the financial sponsor behind all of this. And by the way, Google has hired the former Clinton Foundation CEO, Eric Braverman. So now we know where he went and what he's been doing. He's working for Google now. We're almost seeing the beginnings of literally wars against the U.S. government by corporations. Remember before Trump's election that Dakota Access Pipeline, where Obama issued an executive order and the corporation building the pipeline said, we're going to ignore you. And corporate governance has actually been a theme of many science fiction movies, like Rollerball. And the problem I have with corporate governance, also RoboCop, same theme. The problem I have with that is that in many ways, corporate governance is a lot like theocracy. They're serving a higher purpose, and they're not really that sensitive to the civil population. Everything we do is the will of the gods, and if you ordinary people are suffering, well, that's what God wanted. Everything we do is to please the stockholders, and if we have to make ordinary people, non-stockholders, suffer, well, that's just the price of doing business. At least with a civil government, a nation state, as badly as it may be run, nation states have to, at some level, be responsive to the needs and desires of the general population through the process of democracy and honest, transparent elections, emphasis intended. Now then, Apparently over in New York State, their assembly is getting ready to declare the entire state of New York a sanctuary state, following along with California. And obviously, there's going to be pushback from the White House. We're almost setting up for a new civil war here. Now, here's where it gets really, really interesting. Out in California, the California Senate's Public Safety Committee was having a meeting, and Senate President, this is the California Senate President Pro Tem Kevin DeLeon, who's a Democrat from Los Angeles, admitted half of his family is residing in the United States illegally. They're getting by with falsified Social Security cards and green cards. He actually came on out and admitted it and said, if we go along with Donald Trump's crackdown on immigration, half of my family will have to leave. They're eligible for immediate deportation. Yeah, they are. And I have a feeling, given this gentleman's own accomplishments, that if that half of his family had come on into the United States through the legal immigration process, there wouldn't have been any roadblocks. They made a bad choice. But, of course, they were being encouraged all along saying, well, yeah, there's an immigration law thing, but you don't have to pay attention to it. It's an election year. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to take a phone call. I think it's pronounced Gaither in Oklahoma. I hope I did that right. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Mike, how's it going?
Good, going fine.
Hey, I've got an idea about this, the millennials, the rioting. I call it an abstract attention distraction team. You have a quick response team, and what they do is they show up ahead of the rioters dressed up with clowns and little cars, and they drive around and act like idiots. Instead of breaking windows, have them squeegee in windows, cleaning them. And then you have the cops lined up, dressed up like clowns, because it's a double-edged sword in a way. Because most of these millennials are scared to death of clowns because of all the movies when they're young.
Yeah, plus, remember a couple of months ago there was this thing with the creepy clown phenomenon all over the country. I think it was a PR stunt for a movie that didn't go anywhere.
Well, I'm just saying, I actually think we can beat them with humor. I got a real fast little story I'll tell you.
Okay.
Me and my wife are playing dice with my nephew and niece, and they're 18, 21. And the subject got on the riots, and they started giving us their point, and they got heated, jumped up, and they're snotting and crying and screaming. And me and my wife, after you've been with your wife long enough, you don't have to speak. You both know what each other's thinking. And we just started laughing, belly laugh. We couldn't help ourselves. It was terrible. It was really rude. But finally, they just exploded. So I jumped up, and I said, there's only one thing that can fix this problem right now. And everybody just looked at me and put out my hand and said, pull my finger. And everybody just started laughing and come unglued, and we sat down and finished the game, and life was good.
Well, humor is a very powerful tool to diffuse one of these tense situations, and it's one of the reasons why we try and have a sense of humor on this show as much as possible, because without it, the enormity of what we're dealing with in this day and age would actually be quite overwhelming.
I really do think that we should, instead of magnify or amplify, I think we should simplify, And I really think we got to go back to the true core, what we all do connect with, humor and certain things, and hit those avenues. And not make fun of it, but make fun of the entire situation. I don't know, it might be way out of base, but right now, the way it's just getting farther and farther division. And until we figure this out, I don't know what to say. I can't see it being fixed by Donald Trump or even kicking everybody out of college. This is way deeper than that.
Well, I think the problem is, or the solution is not to kick the kids out of college, but to rededicate those colleges back to actually giving them an education so they can find a good-paying job in a hopefully soon-to-be-restored economy and pay back those student loans. But these days, virtually every university in America seems to be all about brainwashing the kids to believe in certain things like human-caused global warming and Palestinians are bad and Republicans are evil incarnate.
Yeah, and there's humor in that even, you know. It's amazing. And I really appreciate your help, and I'm glad that you extrapolate all the information. You saved me hours and hours. I used to have to do this myself. And people like you, I mean, really help us. I want you to know that.
Well, thank you very much for the kind words. We're going to have to let you go because we got to do a station identification. Right. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And before we take these phone calls, a little more news about the immigration. The other day, there was this Swedish police officer who's on the verge of retirement, so he figured, I can say whatever I want. And he was saying that the refugee influx has brought with it a major, major crime problem. And, of course, is immediately denounced as racist. Oh, you're racist. And we're still seeing all these stories where the refugees are committing crimes. There's one out of RINF.com where this man sexually assaulted a Texas mother in front of her child, and he was not identified as a criminal illegal immigrant, even though he'd been previously deported following a homicide conviction. The corporate media are trying to keep a lid on this. So over in Sweden, a second police officer has now gone public saying the government is just trying to cover up this intense crime wave caused by the migrants. And apparently a couple of other officers have come forward to say, yes, this guy is telling you the truth, the real deal here. All righty, let's see. We're going to take some phone calls. Huey in Great Britain, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Huey, are you there? There you are.
Yes. Earlier, you were talking about corpocracy.
Yes.
And mentioned 2 films. One of which RoboCop about corpocracy.
Yes.
And I remember the good example of that film with Arnold Schwarzenegger called The Running Man.
Yes, that was another good one. Yeah, that had that same theme. I mean, it has been used in many, many movies.
Yes, which the TV company, corporation, tried to run the country. And when they capture him, the army, they they capture him, and the director, the president of the TV station, asked the army, do you know who I am? Yeah, yeah, I know who you are. You're the asshole from the TV.
Well, we've got to watch our language on the radio here. Got to watch the language here because even though the United States is showering white-hot flaming death on innocent people around the world, we're not allowed to use bad words on the radio to show that we are a just and moral people. I think the Resident Evil franchise was also about corporate rule.
Yeah, that's another good one.
Okay, anything else?
No, that's it. I thought the humor will be okay.
All right, well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha, Glenn. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike.
Hello.
Hi. About the EU, and prior to the EU, of course, there was the European Economic Community. This whole thing has been a very gradualized boil the frog, slowly, centralization, of the European government and the creation of the EU. Before EU, there was the European Economic Community, and then prior to that, on the heels of the Marshall Plan after World War II, and then coming in the 60s and 70s, you had they started out as a steel trade treaty. Oh, this isn't, a union. This is just a treaty to facilitate steel trade for the reindustrialization of Europe post-World War II. And then they developed the European Economic Community, then the Euro money, and then the EU with authority and the EU Parliament. So it's all been a very gradualized boil the frog takeover. And,
yes.
Many of the countries were forced into it. They didn't have a binding referendum to join, like England and stuff. So, you know, it's been very much a gradual totalitarianism creeping across.
Yeah, and we're seeing the same thing here in the United States of America. This nation was founded as a coalition of separate states. That's why it's called the United States of America. And that central federal government was tasked with resolving disputes among the separate states and having an army only when the union of states was threatened. And today, of course, we have this central tyrannical federal government that maintains a standing army and has just completely abandoned even the pretense of complying with the Bill of Rights.
Yeah, the federal government has morphed into a metastatic tumor on the body politic of America.
That's a very good way of describing it.
And as to this issue of states' rights, there's an irony occurring right now, because historically, normally it's the conservatives who appeal more to decentralization, states' rights, county rights, municipal rights, and stuff like that, and with a de-emphasis, a careful control of the federal government, limiting its power. That's normally been the conservatives' line.
Well, that's the paleo-conservative position. And
that's my position, yeah.
Yeah, most people don't really understand what is meant by liberal versus conservative. In the original model, conservative meant following along with the idea that government governs best which governs least, and just let people do what they're going to do and only intervene when you have to, as opposed to liberals, which believe in the liberal use of government authority to basically tinker with everything. But unfortunately, over the last couple of decades, between the neocon movement and the neoliberal movement, both of them are gravitating toward that idea of a central power that is in control of every single aspect of our lives. You will eat this food. You're not allowed to know what's in it. You will have these mandatory vaccines. You're not allowed to collect rain on your own property. You will buy this stuff. You'll buy this earpiece for your phone. You will buy our approved health insurance. The removal of choice. It's like I was saying back when Obama was in power. You know you live in a dictatorship when the dictator's wife decides what your kids eat for lunch at school.
Exactly. Now, this begs the question of when is the federal government or the executive branch, as a part of it, rightly exercising legal authority? And I've heard numerous liberals over the years, you know, try and characterize the Civil War as a referendum on the power of the centralized federal government. But now, in this case, you have an executive, the president, with this travel ban. Well, it's very similar to measures that have been implemented by other presidents, and which you did a great synopsis of that earlier. And yet the liberals are now, when it's convenient for their argument, now they're appealing to decentralization for the authority of city governments, state governments, when it's convenient. Now, historically, they don't appeal to that. But now, because of the travel ban issue, now they're going states' rights and city rights and stuff like that.
Well, you know, if liberals didn't have double standards, they wouldn't have any standards at all. And, of course, the big push coming from George Soros and the New World Order is the continuation of this project to literally blur the human race together to erase our sense of a cultural, historical, or regional identity. Because if you have a good, solid sense of who you are, it's much more difficult to control you. And so in order to drop the borders and have a single global government, they need to literally blend all of the human race into one formless mass, where nobody can say, I'm an American over here, and this is more American than that. And that's literally what that liberal agenda is tied in with.
Well, it's and that's for the masses. But for the elite, now you're going to have racial overtones and genetic superiority issues. They're going to appeal to their own groups being superior, whereas you're just a blended mass. And I fear that over the long term, their motives are more nefarious than merely blending and dominating. I think they want to eliminate as well, of course. So I think they want to genocide the planet.
Well, they want to cull the herd. They don't call it genocide because they don't see us as human beings. They want to cull the herd. And again, I understand there is a population problem, and there always will be, because sex is a lot more fun than dying. My opposition to the people screaming population control is they always want somebody else to die or go without children, never themselves. And anytime I have somebody come up and screaming, oh, the world is overpopulated, I say, well, there's a tall building. Feel free to solve the problem by leaping off and try and hit a private central banker on the way to the ground.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. Well, I got to go. They're having a sale on Soylent Green chips.
Soylent Green is made out of people. Soylent Green is made out of people. And by the way, that's another good example of a movie with corporate rule as the theme behind it all. Thanks an awful lot, Glenn. We're going to let you go. We're going to take a second to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And we're going to talk to Jill in Arizona. Aloha, Jill. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, howdy there, Michael. I sure enjoy your show, and I have to laugh about the Soylent Green comment because that's been on YouTube live chats and the riots. That's been my comment: is get the scoops. Anyhow, I just wanted to counter a prior caller. Something about Oliver North saying it's a new world order and Trump's leading it. And I looked up the Hannity interview, and it was on the 6th, and I watched it twice, and she's confused, I do believe. So I just wanted to correct that.
Well, thank you very much for doing. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for doing the due diligence. I presume he said New World Order. The part about Trump leading it didn't really make any sense. But we've been hearing the phrase New World Order going all the way back to President George Herbert Walker Bush, who was talking about, we're revealing a new world order, and he was talking about getting rid of the useless eaters and all this other very draconian stuff.
We just couldn't believe he was saying that because he was our guy, The Republicans were the good guys. But I'm so thrilled with Trump, and I've got hope again. And I love your show. Thank you very much. All
right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go. And as far as Trump is concerned, I have to admit at this point the thrill is gone. And we're just going to wait and see what actually emerges. Again, I want to see what Trump does once the confirmation of his nominees is over and done with, and he doesn't have to pander to the Senate. If we see some changes, then he was playing the Congress. If we don't see some changes, then we're in trouble. And as I mentioned before, if Trump does not dramatically change the course of our war policy and our economy, he could very easily be the last president of the United States of America. Now then, getting over to Paris, they've really gone overboard into the police state, and apparently 4 officers were stopping youths at Aulnay-sous-Bois, north of Paris, and apparently they arrested a 22-year-old, threw him on the ground, and used one of the police batons to violate him. And apparently he had to go to the hospital, traumatized with a severe wound, and people are now rioting there. And you have to wonder, was this just an act of incredible stupidity by the French police, or was this staged to provoke riots? Another color revolution tactic. We need to be very, very careful when we see these shocking things being presented to us. Is it really something that actually happened, or is it a hoax to push a political agenda? Extreme skepticism is warranted. And that's all it is, skepticism. I got an email the other day saying, oh, you're being paranoid, you're a conspiracy theorist. I said, no, I'm just being skeptical. And we have a right to be skeptical. Nowhere in the Constitution are we compelled to take the government's word at face value about anything at any time. It's just not in there. We have a right to disbelieve the government. We have a right to disbelieve the corporate media. We have an obligation as Americans to develop our own perception and analytic skills. It's just like Thomas Jefferson said, the highest duty of any American is to keep themselves fully informed so they can make good choices. Now, sitting and watching corporate media and listening to political speeches is not keeping yourself fully informed. Keeping yourself fully informed involves activity on your part, going on out and digging out the facts for yourself. A skeptical people are a free people. And that's what's really making the government and the corporate media very, very nervous. All right, let's take another phone call. George in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Doing, Mike?
Doing okay? Hello? Yes, you're on the air.
Yeah, the thing is, seeing what happened in Berkeley last week, I was kind of like thinking about this. I just think like Donald Trump saying, pulling federal funding from Berkeley, and I really think this goes for all these universities that's fomenting this leftist crap. And I don't really, if a student's going to take out a Pell Grant or a student loan, that'll only be designed for curriculum that's for marketable skills like engineering, nursing, medical. None of this woman study, Chicano studies, black studies, whatever, because all it's doing is making a bunch of worthless degrees.
Yeah, and we've already got enough art history majors. I mean, what are you going to do with a degree in gender studies other than be a professor in gender studies? But we need to be very, very careful here because it has now emerged that what happened at Berkeley was not being done by Berkeley students but by outside agitators brought in from outside. And I hope whoever is monitoring this show on behalf of Donald Trump gets that message to him, because we ought not to be punishing the University of California at Berkeley when they themselves were victimized by these outside agitators.
Also, too, these outside agitators, the foundations that fund them, I don't care if it's the Ford Foundation, Rockefeller, Carnegie, or Soros foundations. I want them, if they've been involved in subversion of the Republican form of government, that under the RICO statutes they be shut down and their assets seized. Because I don't think we need these foundations funding the demise of our country.
Well, I would agree with you in theory. Unfortunately, as we saw from that judge up in Seattle, even our judiciary has become highly politicized. And judges seem to feel that it's okay for them to push their particular political agenda from the bench, even in defiance of the actual letter of the law.
Yeah, that's true. And also, about the police, you ever hear like some students on campus saying the police, they're ordered by the chancellor to shut down free speech. And I sent an email to our governor, and I was saying, for any of these university police officers, that you have to be certified by the state of Texas to be a police officer or sheriff's deputy, that if they follow an unlawful order from the chancellor to shut down free speech or arrest or suppress free speech, that since it's an unlawful order, they should have their certifications yanked.
Well, again, going on back to Berkeley, the chancellor had the campus police not trying to suppress free speech, but just trying to counter the rioting and violence. In any event, it turned out it was the mayor of Berkeley who apparently issued a stand-down order to the city police, not the campus police, to let this thing get completely out of control and make it newsworthy. So again, we need to find out what this guy's connection is to Soros and the Color Revolution.
Yes, I mean, because I could tell you one thing. I gotta say, I hope Jeff Sessions comes confirmed soon, because I know I've been hearing rumors that a bunch of arrest warrants are going out, that Chucky Schumer is going to be arrested. I don't know for what, but I don't know. It's just rumors and speculation. But the thing is, if Jeff Sessions is Attorney General, like I say, if he's going to start going after corruption, he's going to have to pick his battles and choose wisely.
Yes, he does. He absolutely does here. Now, at this point, it's very obvious that Hillary Clinton is considering a run in 2020, and so Donald Trump and Sessions and Comey are well motivated to nail her on a single felony, which would then make her ineligible to run for the White House. So Trump doesn't have to go through fighting off all that election fraud all over again. But again, the sad reality is, if all of the corruption that the Clintons and the Bushes were into were to come out all at once, the federal government would collapse. The American people would just be absolutely stunned to know all that has been going on, including the CIA-sanctioned gun and drug running and the selling of these drugs to our kids here in the United States of America. And so Sessions and Trump and Comey are going to have to be selective. They need to find something that they can successfully prosecute with that is not going to threaten the legitimacy of the government itself.
Well, the perfect prosecutor, I think, special prosecutor that they can pick, I think, would be Congressman Bob Barr.
Bob Barr, let's see, the guy who founded Larry Klayman is down in Florida. I'd love to see him as the special prosecutor going after Hillary Clinton. He's still got to be sore after his RICO lawsuit got kicked out by a Clinton-appointed judge. Anyway, George, we're going to let you go. We got more callers waiting on the line. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. America, welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones here. Martin in Washington State, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I know you're always interested in geeky information.
Yes.
The last few days, I've encountered spam that is really strange. Can't block it. And the reason that you can't block it is that they spoof and malformed an invalid email address.
Yes, that's a very common
so
trick. That's a very, very common.
Well, you've heard of it.
Oh, yeah, I deal with it all the time. As the malware spreads, it'll basically either manufacture or simply copy off names from the contact list in the mail program to do that, so that you can't block by name. And that's been around actually for quite a while.
Okay, well then, I just encountered it the first time a few days ago, so I won't take any more of your time.
Well, before you go, are you using Outlook?
Yes, I am.
Okay, because you know there's a built-in spam filter there.
I'm using Outlook email, webmail.
Oh, okay. You might want to check the webmail because many of those online web systems also have a spam filter, but you have to turn it on. Okay?
It is. And one of the things that I've noticed is all my spam is going to my email, my inbox, rather than my junk email box. And then I'm getting this thing, and some of these don't have unsubscribe at the end.
I know the ones you're talking about, the ones that are selling counterfeit iPhones and things like that. Yeah, there really isn't much you can do about those, but you might want to contact whoever runs your webmail portal and just say, is there anything that we can do about this? Anyway, Martin, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go, and we're going to get Dale in Ohio. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Can you hear me?
I can. Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you. I have to learn how to say
great.
I can hear you because that scam is still going on out there.
I know. I'm calling to correct what you said on yesterday's show and today's show regarding Berkeley. You kind of exonerate Berkeley by saying it's an outside force that pulled all that stuff off. But the truth is that one of their instructors was the one who knocked out that Trump supporter, and he's now running from the law. He's supposedly in New York somewhere. And then there's Robert Reich. Oh, what a beauty he is.
Oh, yeah.
For telling everybody it's the right wing that caused all this stuff, and if Milo hadn't opened his mouth, they wouldn't have that problem. So, yeah, I don't exonerate UC Berkeley at all. They're 100% complicit in this.
No, I think this falls under the category of useful idiots, where these organizers who were putting this together were able to convince some of the Berkeley students to go along with it, but it was definitely instigated from outside. What was it? The Antifas was the group that was behind it, and they're funded by George Soros. And these same people, they didn't even change their clothes. They've been seen at a lot of these other university riots. They were seen at some of the anti-Trump riots right after the election. And it's the same group, and this is apparently their full-time job, just getting bussed around the country and causing a ruckus.
Well, that may be, Michael, but, either way, I just want to make sure that UC Berkeley is held accountable for part of this because they brought it on pretty much themselves, and they're really doing very, very disservice when Robert Reich speaks up at all. But anyway, that was my complaint for the day, and I've been listening and for the last couple of months, and keep it up because I hope Milo goes and stirs the pot again.
He's going to. He's going to go back and have his speech at Berkeley after all, and that's a good thing for him to do. All right, well, listen, we're going to let you go, and thank you very much for the phone call. We have another caller, but we're coming up really close on a commercial break, so I'm going to leave you till after the break here. There's some music right there. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before I go back to the phones here, I've got this one story to share which ties in with what one of our callers was saying about how universities are just teaching all kinds of nonsense that is really not going to help their students find the jobs needed to repay those student loans. And so we're seeing this story, and it is out of governmentslaves.info. Apparently, over in Greece, their schools are dropping the teaching of classical texts to make room for students to study gender and sexuality, because after all those ancient Greeks, they're just a bunch of white guys anyway, and we shouldn't be paying attention to them, like Aristotle and Plato and Socrates and all those people. I mean, who needs to pay attention to them? Now, first of all, if you need to go to school to study sexuality, my goodness, I don't know. I mean, there's all these YouTube videos out there. But, I mean, this is really ridiculous. What is somebody going to do with a degree in gender and sexuality out there in the workplace? It really is ridiculous. Okay, we're going to go back to the phones. Terry in California. Aloha, Terry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Mike, I like that new music you got when you came right back on.
That was one of the ones Claire created for the show.
Okay, Claire. I just wonder if there's any truth in the rumor that I heard this morning in about 4 places on the internet that the FBI has about 70 indictments ready waiting for Sessions to be confirmed about people that they want to serve, 40 in the Congress or in the government and 30 somewhere else. Concerning Pizzagate and pedophiles. Is there any truth in that?
No, there isn't, because that story originated with Sorcha Fall, and Sorcha Fall is a known disinformationalist, planting junk on the independent media, trying to get people to embarrass themselves. Again, I'm not saying that we don't have a problem with pedophilia in government and the church and everywhere else, but they were pushing this idea that they had specific names that were out there, and anybody who quoted those names would be open to a defamation lawsuit. And that's why I'm still staying away from this story, and if it turns out it was absolutely accurate, I will apologize on the air. But again, pedophilia is a real major problem, but this whole Pizzagate thing feels like it's a setup to trip up the independent media in some way that where they can be taken out.
Okay. Let me just ask you this. Did you get any acknowledgement from the Trump campaign for all the campaigning you did for Trump?
Nope, not a word. Yeah, but then I wasn't really expecting any anyway. I'd like a reply to the paper letter I sent them, but they may be dealing with a lot of postal mail right now. So we'll see. The real test will be December when I send them a Christmas card and see if I get one back here, because I sent Christmas cards every year to the Obamas and the Clintons and to the Bushes, and I never got one back.
You know, my grandfather walked around the neighborhood when he was still alive and with a Kennedy sign on his hat. He got a nice letter from the Kennedy campaign. Of course, that was a long time ago and a lot less people and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, it would be nice to get some kind of an acknowledgement, but I'm not holding my breath at this point.
I don't blame you. Okay, well, thanks again.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to take Rick in Fort Lauderdale. Aloha, Rick. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. You know, I was hearing them talk about all these names and stuff coming up, and I was just thinking the same thing. Although Sheldon Silver, the best friend of Chuck Schumer, is in prison and they fly in the same circles, I would think that Chuck Schumer is pretty much better at covering his trail. Why don't they do something with this Sorcha Fall person and expose him throughout the alternate media so that when his stuff comes out, it'll automatically be debunked or gotten rid of, so he becomes absolutely, useless.
Well, we're trying to do that, and the other known disinformationalists, unfortunately, there are other websites that are engaged in the practice of propaganda laundering, where they'll copy off the stories without attribution, and then members post them to my website to make it look like it's a real stories. And so we have to always follow the trail back to its original source. And if it goes to Sorcha Fall, then 9 times out of 10, it's absolute junk.
Right. I know that the DNC emails that got out were legit, because we saw the change of the guard with Debbie Wasserman getting knocked out and all that. A lot of those emails were contained inside as bookends in between. So there might be something real going on with the Wiener guy. We know he was actually investigated. That's a matter of fact. So
yeah, he may be looking. He may be looking at child porn charges, or because you think this guy would have learned his lesson by now, and he's still out there sexting with this underage girl. But apparently there was material found on that laptop that included State Department emails, which were not supposed to be on that laptop, and apparently there were emails there that were not turned over to the various investigations. And that was really what kind of forced Comey's hand to come on out and say the investigation isn't over. New evidence has surfaced on that. But again, we know from past history, the Franklin scandal, that there are enough of these sickos in our government. They will do whatever it takes to protect themselves from any kind of investigation and prosecution. There was a video documentary that was actually done about the Franklin scandal. It was called Conspiracy of Silence, and it was scheduled to air on TV. It was listed in the TV guide and everything, and apparently a coalition of members of Congress went to the network that was going to broadcast it and said, you pull this right now, or we will pass laws that will drive you out of business. And apparently the threat worked. The documentary was pulled. Somebody bought up all of the available VHS copies of it, and they disappeared. The version that is out there now is an editor's work tape that somehow survived the purge. But, I mean, these are the lengths they're going to go to cover up some of this behavior that they're doing, and I imagine they're going to do exactly the same thing this time. But I would like to see it come on out, that we still have pedophiles in the highest levels of our government. But Pizzagate just felt like it was a setup, and that's why I'm being cautious.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's the right thing to do to be cautious, but we know that most of these people all have like a sociopathy, a narcissistic personality disorder with sociopathy. Definitely. Why don't we just do the same thing we do with our public servants? If firemen, police officers, and FBI agents all have to take a battery of psychological tests, why don't we make these people, before they enter public service, be subjected to the same psychological stuff, because they can do more damage?
I would absolutely agree with you on that one, 100%. Unfortunately, there is no absolute scientific method to determine if somebody is mentally ill, and sociopaths are absolutely gifted at lying and concealing their sociopathy, even from trained psychologists. So it's difficult. It should be done. At the very least, we ought to drug test these people on a regular basis. But certainly Anthony Weiner's behavior, that's just not normal for him to keep on doing this stuff, even after it's cost him his career.
Well, I, for one, hope he lands in prison, because if you victimize children, I don't care what political party you are or whatever, you should be spending the rest of your life in prison.
I hope he makes a deal. That's what I hope. I'd like to see him cut a deal. And start getting these people turning on each other and making their own deals, and let the whole thing unravel. All right, we're going to let you go here, and we're going to go to Nick in Southern California. Nick, thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I've been going back and forth with you on emails with regard to the electro idea.
Yes.
That's not what I'm calling about, though. I'm calling about caution in reporting. Now, with Milo and Berkeley and all that, the caller about 2-3 callers ago was saying that it was a professor and he's on the run and he's in New York. I think actually, accurately said, it's a staffer, and I think it might even be somebody in maintenance. I don't believe there's a professor on the run.
Well, we'd have to go back and take a look at the story. We do know there were some people there who were from Berkeley, but again, this was organized and instigated from outside, and they were just able to find a bunch of useful idiots among the students and staff. I seem to remember there was one professor involved in one of these protests that was using profanity and caused a little bit of a ruckus.
I think that professor may have been in New York. I don't remember, but she's on video and she's telling the cops that they need to beat up.
That's right. She was at NYU. She was at NYU. And then, of course, we had that preschool teacher who was out there with the F-bombs and screaming, you know, give us your money, we got to start. I mean, talk about hysterical cult fanatic behavior. That is it right there. Okay, anything else, Nick?
And I think, yes. Now, I think what they should do is keep that up, and that way they look bad. But there was a meme I thought you would appreciate, and it says that, you know, high school teachers say, I'm not going to share my political opinions, that would be unprofessional. And a college professor would say, what's the square root of F Trump?
Well, you know, I think that's very inappropriate. I think that's very inappropriate. When I was teaching computer animation over at UH Manoa, I never brought politics into that classroom. These kids were there to learn about computer animation, and that's what I taught them, because that's what I was supposed to be teaching them. And some of them knew who I was outside the university, and they'd try and start a conversation and say, no, when I'm here at the UH Manoa, it's computer animation. And, you know, if you want to learn about my politics, you can go to the website on your own computer, in your own home, in your own time. But we maintain the BBL, the big black line. And like I said, the problem with so many of these colleges and universities is they've stopped thinking about educating these kids with useful skills, and they have become propaganda and indoctrination centers. And it only costs $75,000 to go there.
Oh, yeah. My sister's college professor was literally a Marxist, and I went to a party, and he was spouting his stuff. You know, I think the DBL should be something that, if it is crossed, then that professor's job should be on the line.
Okay, now, we have to be very, very careful here, because if he's on his own property in his own home, he has a right to his First Amendment, a right to freedom of speech, and he can say whatever he wants. I just disagree with them doing it on the campus of the university, because that's inappropriate behavior at that point.
Well, that's a good distinction, Mike. I could talk to you for a long time, but I know you got stuff to get to. Thanks again for everything that you do.
All right, thank you very much here. We're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Mark, are you there? Going once? Going twice? Okay. I guess Mark...
What? Do you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
You hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay. All right. Listen, Mike, what I want to say is two things, actually. I saw both on the InfoWars website. Well, one is on a website, one is actually on the show. One was that Rand Paul has warned about Elliot Abrams.
Yes.
Somebody that he might be being considered for the #2 post in the State Department. Now, this is very serious if that's the case. I transferred to my Facebook, and I made a comment there that would be a game changer for me as far as Trump goes. That, you know, that would turn me off from Donald Trump if he did that. This guy, not only, you know, at the very center of the Iran-Contra scandal, but the Iran-Contra scandal is really only, people don't understand, this is only stuff I've studied since. That's just a tip of the iceberg. What the real scandal is, and it has to do with Gary Webb, too, with
yes.
Gary Webb,
absolutely,
Rick Ross, is the smuggling of tons and tons. And by the way, you mentioned Ollie North.
Yes.
Unfortunately, he's up to it, too. Tons and tons of cocaine into the United States and really caused the crack epidemic. That means it cost the lives of I don't know how many thousands of people, the destruction of their lives other ways, how many people go into jail, the prison, and all that. All what it costs, courts and prisons and law enforcement and all. Okay, all this damage done, and this is the real scandal. And plus, like I said, I believe Gary Webb was murdered. There was another guy, by the way, Terry. I was studying something on the computers this week of Terry Reid.
Yes.
Who did you hear him?
Well, he wrote a very good book about it called Compromise Clinton, Bush, and the CIA. It's a very thick book. It's now very hard to find, but it's definitely worth the read. And Terry was part of this whole mechanism where they were running this smuggling network out of Arkansas under then Governor Bill Clinton, and they were manufacturing untraceable military weapons without serial numbers, shipping them down to Nicaragua to give to the Contras to use against the Sandinistas. And because this was an illegal operation by the CIA, it was a violation of the Boland Amendment and the Logan Act, they funded it by bringing cocaine back into the United States on those same smuggler aircraft, selling it to our kids. And Bill Clinton provided operational security in the state of Arkansas, keeping the authorities away from these places like the Mena Airport, which was one of the hubs, and setting up this loose network of savings and loans, land flip deals, and various other mechanisms in order to launder the money, which was then paid out to all the participants in this operation in the form of a loan, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, from the Arkansas Development Finance Authority, a loan which never had to be repaid. And that was the machine that led to Iran-Contra. And then when Eugene Hassenfuss's plane got shot down, and he basically blabbed about the whole thing to the Nicaraguans, and it went public, and they had to do damage control, and what they did was a limited hangout where they admitted to the gun running to the American people, tried to tangle it all up with Iran, but they worked very hard to keep that specter of government-sanctioned drug running and drug sales to our children from the American people. Hawaii's Senator Daniel Inouye was chairing the Iran-Contra hearings, and every time they got anywhere near Mena, Arkansas, or the drug component, he would shout executive session, they'd kick out the public and the media and slam those doors.
Is Terry Reid still alive today? I saw this interview on YouTube over the weekend. I had nothing else to do that day, so I was fishing around YouTube, and I saw that. Is he still alive today?
To be very honest, I don't actually know, but during this upcoming commercial break, I will try and find out.
The other thing is Alexander Dugin. I don't know if you know who he is, the
yes.
great Russian philosopher. He was in Alex Jones today. He was for a whole hour being interviewed. I was wondering whether you could get an interview with him.
All right, I'll try. I'll try on that. Anyway, listen, we're going to have to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, down in Denver, there's been a tragedy. Police officer Scott Von Lanken was killed by a gentleman named Joshua Cummings, who apparently just walked up to him and shot him in the neck. And apparently Joshua Cummings is Muslim, and he's radical Muslim to the point where his own mosque contacted the Department of Homeland Security saying this guy is potentially a danger to the public. And the Department of Homeland Security apparently didn't do much of anything about it. Now, this Joshua Cummings, he's an Army veteran. But it appears he's got some other mental issues. Maybe he's on prescription antidepressants. We're not sure, but it's a dangerous situation. Now then, I want to talk a little bit about Fukushima, because obviously living over here in the Pacific Ocean, it is an issue. I'm probably going to go back to doing daily radiation readings. I took one this morning. And it is up as high as it was in the immediate aftermath of Fukushima. So we're looking at this story coming out of Washington's blog, and they're talking about the reported radiation of 530 sieverts per hour. That is very intense. It is worse than the worst at Chernobyl. The highest radiation level ever measured at Chernobyl was 300 sieverts per hour. And that intense a dose can kill a human being almost instantly. So the new record at Fukushima is 70% higher than of Chernobyl. Now, interestingly enough, the highest level previously measured at Fukushima was only 73 sieverts per hour in March of 2012. Now, that's still a very, very serious dose of radiation. So I want to raise something that is a possibility, and again, if it's true, I don't know what they're going to do about it. And that is, we had reports yesterday that some of the melted slag from the fuel for the reactor has now gone down below the water table in that area. Now, the reason there is water inside a fission reactor is to act as a neutron moderator. If the fuel rods are sitting there all by themselves, the neutrons emitted by a fissioning uranium atom are actually traveling too fast to be captured by other uranium atoms and create a chain reaction. And that's why these reactors are filled with water, which is also used as the thermal transfer medium in that primary cooling loop. So if this ruined core of a reactor is down below the water table and it's soaked with water, we may be looking at a situation of spontaneous, uncontrolled fission activity taking place underneath the remains of the reactor, and that would certainly be cranking out this kind of highly intense radiation. And I don't know what they're going to do about it. Now, for those who wrote in were worrying about it, there is no possibility of a nuclear detonation. More about this when we come back from our station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And in theory, over in San Francisco, the 3-judge panel is now convening to hear arguments in regard to Trump's immigration ban on specific countries. So we're going to be keeping an eye out for what they say. But again, the law is on Donald Trump's side here. So we're talking about Fukushima, which seems to have some serious problems developing if, in fact, there is spontaneous, uncontrolled fission taking place down in the ground. We're going to see a lot more radioactivity coming on out of it. Yesterday I suggested going to Google Earth and looking at the site today, and you will just see for acres and acres around it, it's filled with these giant drums and boxes of highly radioactive waste. If there were a plane crash into it, or a fire, or an earthquake were to rupture those drums, it's just unimaginable, the devastation. And by the way, I'm getting emails from people who live in Japan near the area, and they're saying that, yes, they're getting thyroid problems and other medical issues. Japan's proclamation that everything is safe is based on commercial interest. They want to actually start exporting food from the Fukushima area and have people buy it as blindly trusting as they do the GMO. So we're talking about the possibility of fission taking place in the ground. Now, for those who wrote in who were concerned, there is no possibility of an actual nuclear explosion. Okay, and the reason for that is that uranium for a power station is enriched to 3 to 4% of the uranium-235 isotope, which is the part that actually fissions and creates heat and energy. Weapons-grade uranium has to be enriched to 90% or higher. And that is a wide gulf. Now, for all the people propagandizing about Iran's going to take their power station and make a bomb factory out of it, it's not like you have a blender and you go from chop to puree. It is a major effort to go from 4% enrichment to 90% enrichment. It's not a trivial exercise. So, what is in the ground underneath Chernobyl is 4% uranium-235. The wild card, though, is the plutonium content, which plutonium is a byproduct of fission reactors. It's why they prefer uranium fission reactors to thorium reactors, which don't make bomb stuff. But again, plutonium cannot explode unless it is highly compressed to a high density. That's the whole purpose of that outer explosive shell, to literally crush the plutonium down to where the neutrons will be captured during that fission process. So, Fukushima is a problem, but there's not going to be any mushroom clouds over Japan from that. Now, somebody wrote on in and was saying, we need to develop a solution to solve this problem. Unfortunately, the nuclear genie is out of the bottle on this one. Even if Fukushima magically were to vanish tomorrow, you still have the contamination. You have huge amounts of water in the Pacific Ocean at varying degrees of radioactivity. You have the ocean floor where these heavier isotopes are settling out. They're being ingested by bottom-feeding fish. It's a mess. There's no way to clean it up. The engineering and technology does not exist to be able to decontaminate literally a third of the world's oceans. It's just not there. And Claire was making this very cogent comment that those TEPCO engineers and executives especially, who made the decisions to pull back on the safety systems at Fukushima, ought to be held legally accountable for all the destruction and damage they've done. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Steve in Ontario, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
Doing okay.
Good, good. I got a question about you, or for you, about radiation and the effects on the human body. I don't know about it that much, but can it alter the DNA of the body and scramble the DNA if over long-term exposure or generations of exposure? Can it alter or change, let's say, for example, males to females or transgender situations? No, I'm serious.
I understand. I understand where you're going with this. Of course, radioactivity damages DNA, and natural occurring radioisotopes produce three types of particles: alpha particles, beta particles, and gamma particles. Alpha particles are actually fairly harmless outside the body because they are blocked by the dead skin cells on the surface of your skin. But if you ingest a particle emitting alpha radiation, it gets stuck in there. There's no way to find it and get it on out, and it's an aggravated invitation to cancer. Obviously, the beta radiation is a lot more penetrating. The worst is gamma, which is what you get from nuclear weapons. But in any event, the issue is less brief exposure than permanent contamination. And one of the reasons we have to be careful with the ocean life in the Pacific is if a fish is swimming off the coast of Fukushima and they become highly contaminated, they're still just as contaminated when they make their way over to San Diego. And that is really where, people need to be careful. Here in Hawaii, all of the sushi restaurants have big signs proclaiming that their fish are coming from places around the Atlantic Ocean. That's how bad the situation is out here.
Well, and I won't buy fish from the Pacific Ocean at all.
Or the Gulf of Mexico.
Canada. Oh, right, exactly. So the other question is, the reason I'm bringing this up is anytime there is an agenda that is pushed in society as heavily as gay marriage, transgender, acceptance, everything like that, most times those agendas are being pushed because either somebody knows something is about to change, or they're pushing it for some reason, promoting it as a way of accepting some of the mutation that is about to happen over the next few generations. So I was just thinking maybe it was either from the radiation that they know is unstoppable there, or the genetically modified organisms that they're putting in our food and stuff. Like, it just seems that this push for transgender acceptance and gay and everything else like that, I don't have a problem with people in general, but it just seems the push is so heavy. There has to be something behind it that they're trying to get out in front of it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And again, this goes back to the New World Order and an attack on our sense of self, where they're trying to make us confused about who we are, where we're from, what our history is, and even what bathrooms to use. Now, to go back to your original point, all human embryos start out as female, and what changes the gender is an enzyme provided by the mother during gestation. Your gender is not decided in the original DNA. It's by default it's female, and that's how that mechanism works. All of the mutations the radiation induces tend to be wildly out of control. They're not confined to a certain specific situation. There's already websites of photos from around the Fukushima area of deformed plants and even deformed animals. Again, major cause of cancer.
Right. Okay. No, I thought you might know, and that helps me out a bit. It's just I just am overwhelmed by the amount of, every darn TV show you turn on nowadays is all about mixed families, gay marriage, and there's always transgenders everywhere now, and I don't see it in society. Now, maybe it's because they're not saying much, but what do you think the percentage of the population is out there right now that is actually transgender? Is it 0.5%, 0.1%?
Oh, I'd say it's way above that. And
really,
my particular theory about these gender issues is that we actually have a built-in population control mechanism. Because if you go back and you study history, you will find that at times of extreme social stress, the per capita incidence of homosexuality goes up. And so I see homosexuality as actually necessary for the long-term survival of the human race. Now, before you go, I want to point out something. You're approaching this whole question as if it's a foregone conclusion, certain things are good or bad. And the reality is, all of your attitudes are given to you during your life experience. Newborn babies are not offended by nudity. Newborn babies are not shocked by certain words. Newborn babies are not bothered by certain lifestyles. All of that has to be ingrained in you by your family, your clergy, and your local society. And it really can be very arbitrary at times. So it's all learned behavior, and it's all taught to you to make you controllable by certain vested interests, by the clergy, by the politicians, and so forth and so on, because politicians always like to come on out and say, this is evil, and if you vote for me, I will work to throw the evil ones to the lions, or whatever they're going to say. Okay?
Right. And that makes sense. It truly does. But, I mean, the species wouldn't have survived as long as it had if the mass majority of the population was gay. So heterosexuality is, in my mind, kind of the norm, because we wouldn't still be around if it wasn't.
I think they're both I think the difference between you and I is I see them as both normal and both serving a specific function. Heterosexuality to grow the population, homosexuality to keep it under control.
So it's always been there. It's just been
absolutely.
Hiding.
Absolutely. There's never been a period in history where there wasn't homosexuality. And by the way, they've observed homosexual behavior in other life forms besides mankind, and it may be serving the same function there as well.
Right. Okay. No, I appreciate your input on that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network, and we're going to talk to Errol in the Netherlands. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Errol, are you there? I'm not hearing... Oh, there you are.
This is Mark in Western New York.
Okay. Let's take Mark, and then we'll go back to Errol. Mark in New York, what's on your mind?
Fukushima. I've been studying this nearly 6 years, and regarding Chernobyl, if they didn't have 3 guys go underwater to open the valves before corium melted through, it would have had an explosion much worse than the initial 2 explosions that rocked that reactor. Now, my personal belief is Fukushima, anything that was in those reactor vessels have long since melted through into the earth.
Yes.
But who knows? My contention is that if it was to reach, if there was a melted corium that was red hot and it came in contact with a large body of water, that could incur a large underground explosion.
If it was contained by the subsurface rock strata, you could see an explosion, you could see a geyser, but there may not be enough water involved there where that's going to happen. In the case of Chernobyl, what exploded was not the fuel itself, but the graphite that they were using for a moderator in that reactor design, which was basically carbon, and it overheated, and as soon as it got in contact with the air, it went up.
Agreed.
Okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now we're going to go back to Errol in the Netherlands. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Okay. Are we right on now?
Yes, you're on the air now.
Okay, very good. Hello, Nui Nui.
Aloha, Nui Nui.
Nui Nui. Today's my birthday.
You're finally old enough to drink.
Well, I'm now 41 years old.
Uh-huh.
But I'm not, how do you call it? I say always, you must see when the fission, what you just said about Fukushima and everything about plutonium, the fission, it's happening in when the male and the female is going to have intercourse. So I think, now it's February, I think I was created in June. In June.
Okay, all right.
What do you think of that theory?
All right, let's see. It sounds really kind of good. I mean, looking at my birthday, I think I was somebody's Christmas present to somebody else here. Anyway, Errol, anything else?
Yes, I just want to say to people that say that what you just said about plutonium, I think it's 238. It needs so much pressure to need fission, and what we also see, the explorers that has gone to Jupiter and to I think it was the Viking. They had fission reactors.
No. You're misspeaking.
What was it?
Okay, it was a radioisotope thermoelectric generator.
Radioisotope, sorry. Yeah.
Okay, I'm very familiar with these because we used them on the Viking landers. They are not fission reactors. They are simply isotopes of plutonium that generate a lot of heat naturally from radioactive decay, and the heat is converted to electricity through basically thermocouples. And in the case of Viking, the surplus heat is what kept the landers from freezing during the Martian night. But they are not actually fission reactors of any kind. And they used them on Viking, they used them on Voyager, they're using it on Curiosity. And it's actually a very safe system for power, as long as you don't puncture the outside shielding on it. And I believe there's one of the big Japanese corporations actually manufactures a commercial RTG for remote locations like Antarctic research stations, where these things will have a 5-year lifespan. They're very expensive, obviously, but if you're setting up some kind of a long-term base someplace that's really off the grid, these are a great power supply.
Exactly. They can do 8 years, they can do 20 years. It depends exactly what you say. About the amount that you put in, and it's what you put in and what's the output. So it's very interesting that you also know it. And many people misunderstand the thing also about Fukushima. Just what I heard before, they say, "Oh, it's going to be a nuclear reaction. There's going to be an explosion." No, there's not going to be an explosion because it's already it's digressing. It's out of its case, it's out of its shell. So when it flows, there is some sort of fission, but not in the kind of that you can say, okay, this is going to be explosive. No, the pressure when you have an explosion with, just like Trinity, when you look at the experiment with Trinity, that was the nuclear bomb, they thought, well, first of all, let's see if it's going to spread. It's a very crazy analogy, but they didn't know when Trinity was going to explode.
There was actually a concern it could set the atmosphere on fire. And
exactly. So that it's going to be a continuum,
Yes.
Continuum of reaction. So, but it didn't happen. It was just like bang and boom, it was gone.
Yes.
So, hey, thank you very much, Mike. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to start with Kyle in Pennsylvania. I'm probably going to have to take you through our next commercial break, but what's on your mind?
We lost Kyle.
We lost Kyle. Let's go to Eugene in Ohio. Aloha, Eugene. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I wanted to talk to you about this short-term individual.
Yes.
And this pedophile gate, Pizzagate stuff. I've been looking at this, and does this come back if you know to somebody named David Booth?
Yes. That's his real name.
Okay.
And he lives just down the road from the CIA.
Now, I was reading about that, too, that he may be a asset for the CIA, the ADL, Southern Poverty Law Center. And
yeah, well, he's somebody's asset. All right, Eugene, got to take a commercial break. Thank you very much for the phone call, and we'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and the court hearing on Trump's travel ban is now underway, but they're already telegraphing that the appeals court may not issue a decision today, so we're just going to have to wait and see what happens on that one here. Now then, I've been talking a lot about the documentary Vaxxed, and there it is. As you know, it is a very controversial film. It talks about contraindications to the safety and efficacy of vaccinations. It was yanked from the Tribeca Film Festival, the Houston International Film Festival, a bunch of screenings in London, but apparently the people in Europe are concerned enough where they're buying the DVD, they're getting the pay-per-view, and apparently the European Forum for Vaccine Vigilance is now sponsoring several showings of this documentary film. So they're getting the word out there where we can. Now, the other day we were talking about this study that was done in Italy that found these nanoparticles of very unfriendly chemicals inside vaccines. And it calls into question the assurances by the FDA and the CDC that vaccines are perfectly safe, because what's going on, the total amount of these materials is indeed microscopic, but because they're nanoparticles, they're actually more toxic, because the issue isn't how much mass there is, but how much surface area, which is where the chemical interactions are going to be taking place. So these Italian researchers are saying, even though it's a small amount, this is still a significant problem. Now, Bill Gates is out there getting ready to run up another organization, another front group, to push new vaccines, and he's calling for a new system that would allow new vaccines to be created and approved in less than a year in order to avoid a major global pandemic. Now, Bill Gates is already unaware that the rationale for the indemnification of vaccine makers under the Homeland Security Act was specifically to that purpose, that the vaccine makers might have to rush something through without full testing. So that mechanism is already there. And Gates is talking about DNA, RNA vaccines. It's a very, very dangerous technology. Now, remember, a while back there was a story over in PreventDisease.com where a doctor actually proved measles is not a virus, and he won a case at Germany's Supreme Court, saying nobody can actually document there's a measles virus. So what are they putting in those shots that are going into our children's arms? We don't really know. Now, over in India, they're having a major problem there because they've been using the oral polio vaccine, and all of a sudden they're being hit with vaccine-derived polio all across India. It's striking down these children. Now, here in the United States of America, believe it or not, the American Medical Association has issued a dictum to doctors in the United States that they can talk about this illness as euphemistically as possible. If they actually even hint that the re-emergence of polio is linked to the polio vaccine, they will have their medical licenses yanked. It really is amazing. Now, we're already seeing the pushback to Donald Trump's Vaccine Safety Commission headed by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And so there's this story at the Huffington Post, which we know has a liberal bias. They're claiming that a poll from the Pew Research Center found 82% of Americans say healthy children should be required to get the triple vaccine MMR in order to attend school. I seriously doubt it would be that high, or that American parents are that brainwashed. Because if 82% of the adults are saying this is a good thing, they wouldn't have to have these laws ordering people to do it. And so I suspect that, as we have seen with all the polls that proclaimed Hillary Clinton's landslide victory last November, that this poll is a little bit manufactured. And this is part of the media pushback against Trump's Vaccine Safety Commission. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And as you know, the United States is one of very few industrialized nations that allows advertising for prescription medication on TV. And they're very glitzy commercials, spend a lot of money on them. And, of course, you've got the so-called experts from CDC, which makes money off of vaccines, and the FDA, which is politicized, screaming that vaccines are safe and healthy. But there's one place where you can find out what's really going on, and that is in the FDA's own website, because while the vaccine makers and TV and government agencies can lie to you, the vaccine makers are required to be absolutely honest with the Food and Drug Administration. And as it turns out, the maker of the DTaP vaccine admits it does cause autism. It's listed in the possible adverse reactions to this medication. Anytime a doctor wants to stick something in your arm, you should say, I want to see the package insert. And it'll be this piece of paper filled with very, very, very small print, because they don't want you really reading it. But it is required by law. So you may have to have a little magnifier to go down. Apparently this so-called Tripedia vaccine, adverse events include idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura, I don't know what that is, sudden infant death syndrome, which they always blame on the parents with shaken baby syndrome, anaphylactic reaction, cellulitis, autism, convulsions, grand mal convulsions, encephalopathy, neuropathy, somnolence, and apnea. They're actually admitting the stuff, but if you are out there saying, oh, I'm not sure about vaccines, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist, and we're going to pass a law to make you give this shot to your children anyway. Now then, another story coming out of GreenMed Info. Scientists have now proven the link between exposure to aluminum and the early onset of Alzheimer's disease. And here is where it gets alarming. It's one thing to have an aluminum can in your hand or aluminum tools and stuff. Obviously, you don't want to have aluminum cookware. But apparently, aluminum is used as an adjuvant in vaccines. They're injecting it into your kids. So what's the pharmaceutical industry going to do? Clean up their act? Clean up their medications? Heck no. They like things just the way they are. But apparently, following all these scandals of pharmaceutical companies just driving up the cost of their prescription medications by thousands of %, they've decided they can fix all of this with a new ad campaign. And so the Pharmaceutical Researchers and Manufacturers Association has launched a new ad campaign called Go Boldly. And they're going to spend $100 million on this, and the first ad features handsome actors in lab coats peering into microscopes, alternating with scenes of grateful patients. It's a corporate image spot. And, of course, it's highly inaccurate. A lot of recklessness out there in this whole industry. Story coming out of the Daily Mail in Great Britain. Evangers is a pet food company, and they've had to recall some of their dog food because it was found to be contaminated with a drug used to euthanize pets, phenobarbital, or pentobarbital rather. And the tainted food has already killed one dog and left 5 others sick, but obviously more pets may surface. And the substance can cause drowsiness, dizziness, excitement, loss of balance or nausea, and possibly death. So if you have a dog and you are feeding them Evangers dog food, you might want to be very, very careful. How did it get in there? Well, here's something that a lot of people don't know about veterinary clinics. If you take an animal in there to be put down, and they're shot full of this pentobarbital to painlessly put them to sleep, euthanize them, what do you think the veterinary clinic does with all these dead critters? I mean, unless you have bought a plot at the pet cemetery near your home, you will leave it to the veterinary clinic to dispose of the remains of your cherished pet. What do? They sell them. They sell all these dead animals to rendering factories that use the meat for other purposes, including selling to pet food companies. And that appears to be the vector by which this pentobarbital wound up in Avenger's dog food, because the dog food is made from dog or cat, which is a little weird. Ew. It is amazing here. Interesting little story coming out of Deep Roots at Home on how WebMD, which is touted as the most trusted source of health information online, is starting to lose that trust. Because back in 2010, WebMD had a free online depression test that said you could take and find out if you were suffering from any kind of depression. And as it turned out, the test was rigged in such a way. It didn't matter how you responded to the questions. The only answer you would ever get is you're at risk for a major depression and you should discuss your options with your doctor. The fake test was sponsored by Eli Lilly, the maker of Cymbalta. And that's what it was. It was just to try and get you to inquire about prescription antidepressants. The test was a complete fake. So, speaking of complete fakes, let's start talking about human-caused global warming. Insert ominous music here. Okay, let's see. A lot of snow in Montana, huge winter storm approaching. New storm to bring fresh snow to New England. And it's very heavy back there. I got family back there who was saying, yeah, it is a mess down there. A winter storm has hit Puget Sound, closing schools across the region. And apparently over in Oregon at Santiam Pass, they had a snowslide cut off the road. Had to deal with that one. Now then, Rand Paul put through a bill to pull back on coal industry regulation. It's passed the Senate. It's heading to President Trump's desk for signature. And, of course, the carbon Nazis are screaming, oh, it can't be done, it can't be done. But one of the theories behind this whole human-caused global warming hoax, and a lot of this was funded by George Soros. And remember, George Soros makes his money through short-selling stocks. And the reason that coal and oil were targeted was to drive their stock price down and create another situation where Soros could reap millions, if not billions of dollars, which he could then turn around and pour into his project for the New World Order. So, looks like that one is falling apart. The U.S. House has passed a bill requiring warrants to search old emails. There had previously been a loophole where if the authorities wanted to search your current emails, they had to have a warrant, but if they were older than a certain date, it really didn't matter, it wasn't current. Now the House is saying if you're going to search any emails at all, it does require a warrant. I think that's good. We need to push back on this Fourth Amendment, this erosion of our right to privacy. And it doesn't mean we're doing anything wrong. I mean, one of the common comments we get from the liberals is, well, you know, if you're not doing anything wrong, why do you care if the government is looking at what you're doing? Well, because I am a private person. And two, I may not be doing anything wrong now, but the way their liberals are passing laws left and right, I could be doing something wrong and not even know about it. And in any event, unrestricted access to personal data is not about fighting crime. It's a fishing expedition, looking for civil forfeiture opportunities and so forth. Now, over at Intel, they have a chip out called the Atom C2000 processor family. And apparently it has a design flaw in it that effectively can brick the device. And the company is now having to set aside a huge amount of money to try and deal with this, replacing these defective chips in these computers. And again, boy, thank goodness computer companies are indemnified against civil litigation and product liability, because apparently a lot of computers are using these chips, and as of right now, those computers will not run at all. All right, let's take a phone call. Francis in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha.
Aloha.
Go figure. I have an odd question for you. You mentioned about whenever you take your little one, your canine friend or whatever, or feline friend, to the vet because there's a terminal illness or whatever the case might be, and it's been determined that they need to be, I guess, sent over, I guess you could say, or crossover, because there's nothing physically can be done to remedy their physical ailment.
Yep.
And so forth. When you marked, according to what you informed me of, is that they basically take the body afterwards and they basically do or sell it off to who knows whatever. That's not verbatim, of course, to whoever will take it on. Now, if I recall correctly, are you saying basically whenever you sign off on that form that they present to you before they actually do the act itself, and you check off communal cremation, which means not a personalized cremation, but it's actually part of a group or whatever, that they don't actually do that?
Well, it's going to vary from state to state based on the law. You have the option of retaining custody of the remains of your pet and seeking out your own internment. But the story that I got was that unless there is a specific request made for how the remains are to be disposed of, that they're simply sold to companies that will grind them up and use the protein for other products.
You know, I'm glad you clarified that, because I ran into a situation like that back this November, December, or whatever, and it was a very trying scenario. And so having learned this, it kind of puts me in mind of, in comparison, although not the same, as whenever someone goes and has a fetus or an infant that's below 9 months or under 9 months, aborted for that matter, in this aspect of, horrific aspect, of actually having the body parts sold off.
Yeah, and it is very similar, although the human body parts go for a lot more than Fido or kitty cat.
I'll give you that.
You know, but
you know something, Michael?
Yeah.
Whenever they do that, even for human body parts, a lot of people don't realize that whenever they drink soda, which apparently there was a lot of commentary about that being used for flavoring, I'm not sure if people really realize that whenever they start using stem cells from such a material as that for flavoring of foods or drinks or whatever, they're actually turning people into cannibals.
Yeah, that's that aspect, but you need to remember by the time a baby is being aborted, they no longer have stem cells. That's a very, very early stage of the process. The stem cells are very, very valuable because they're morphologically neutral, and they can be induced into becoming other cells, heart muscle cells, lung cells, and so forth. And it's a one-way trip. Once a stem cell differentiates into a specific kind of tissue, there's no way to send it back.
True. Well, I was trying to recall if it was a stem cell or a regular organ cell or whatever. I didn't recall exactly. But still, the aspect that people are actually consuming food items that have been, well, crossed with that, that people don't actually realize that they're actually being turned into that type of scenario. So it's like,
well, I don't drink soft drinks anymore ever since I gave up aspartame, so my conscience is clear.
I'll tell you what. All right, thanks, Michael. You have a great one.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Now then, we're talking about computers. We're talking about cybercrime. And there was an article that came on out at Tech Republic about the top 5 cybercrime vectors. In other words, the top 5 ways that these cybercriminals will get into your systems. Some of them make a lot of sense. Some of them you may not have thought about. And one of the major vectors, obviously, is the web browser that you're using. and the importance of keeping it up to date with all the latest updates for protection. Apparently, for those of you who are running a business, your own users can be a major problem if they are not adequately trained in security procedures. A lot of the ransomware infections are basically sent in to ordinary workers as a phishing attack, and these workers aren't really paying attention. They click open a link, and the ransomware just runs rampant over them. Industrial control systems, which can be used to spawn denial of service attacks, have default passwords, in some cases no passwords at all. And they can be in control of your physical plant systems. One of the areas of inquiry regarding Fukushima that I still worry about is whether Stuxnet had infected the computer controllers, the Siemens controllers at Fukushima, which is why so many of the emergency systems failed to work when the disaster struck. More and more cybercrime is now targeting cars, and apparently the advice is to lock down your ODB2 ports, your engine control units, remote key systems, V2X receivers, USB ports, and more. Me, when I buy a newer car, I don't want any of that stuff. I don't want the headache of having to manage another intelligent system. Just give me a basic transportation car. I'll accept a GPS, because if you handhold a GPS in Hawaii, it's a $300 fine. So you got to have one built in here. And of course, the Internet of Things seems to be wide open. Tremendously inadequate security, and these Internet of Things are now being used to mount bot networks to carry out nefarious activity. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. Gary from Saskatchewan, aloha, what's on your mind?
Yes, sir. Well, I'd like to talk to you, if I may, about organ harvesting.
Yes.
And from what I'm seeing, I mean, this is just appalling. Like, I've got no proof, but I've seen people get busted for it, but nobody seems to report it. And what's going on in the occupied territories in Palestine is like these people that they take in or shoot or whatever. I mean, goodness gracious, they're taking their organs.
Yeah, that's been a big
really disturbs me.
It is a big problem, and it's not just in Israel. It's in other areas as well. Anyway, listen, Gary, got to let you go. Got to take a break. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today. And a quick program note. Our fearless leader, John Stadmiller, is very much under the weather, so I'm going to be taking the microphone for his show for the next 2 hours, starting at the top of the hour here. One more phone call today. Mateus in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I'm a big Trump supporter, and it's true that all the complaints we have now, we would have the same with Hillary and worse, because she said, I will attack Iran. We don't have Trump saying that it's going to happen for sure. But having said that, I just had this idea of a theory, which is good for us to exercise our brains, and also it's good for maybe Trump to hear some feedback from us. So what do you think of this theory? The establishment couldn't force another Democratic president on us, and couldn't force Hillary. So like the art of war, when your enemy expands, you contract. So we expanded, the establishment, the globalists contracted. Is it any chance that they contracted so small that they were able to sneak in an Israel firster Trump that is going to continue the war agenda and all that? Now, this is probably not the case, but it's useful to keep an open mind into. We're justified to be paranoid at this point. And just a couple of things to keep in mind is that the Democrats did flip their platform. They used to be like the anti-minority platform, like KKK related, and then they flipped. So there is precedent for a complete reversal of their policy. And also think of a sacrificial anode, like on a boat. They may have sacrificed the establishment media without telling the establishment media. They may even be sacrificing the Democratic Party without telling the Democratic Party as a diabolical, evil genius plot to make us think that we won, but meanwhile burrowing into our side and taken us over. So that's all I wanted to say. It's probably not true, but
well, first of all,
we really should consider all possibilities.
First of all, I think you're misinterpreting art of war in terms of expansion, contraction. That's more of a tactical confusion issue. I don't want to see the Democratic Party go away. I don't want the United States to be a one-party nation the way the former Soviet Union was. I'd like to see us go back to the original model of an unlimited number of political parties. But any political party basically wins elections by pandering to what they think the majority opinion of the time is. Back when the Democrats were out there in favor of slavery, it's because most of the people that were voting for them were slave owners or had no objection to it. Today, it's 180 degrees because, again, they're pandering to the crowd. As far as Trump being some kind of instrument of the global New World Order, you need to free yourself from the idea that there is some kind of monolithic single authority running the planet. There isn't. There are different factions that are fighting for domination right now, and you need to keep that part in mind. Okay, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Thank you for the phone call. And we're going to take a break for station identification and be back with John Stadmiller's show after these few words.